Yo, it's Guido coming at you with a Tactics Talk. Welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. On this episode of World of Tanks, we have a tank review of the Tier 9 Swedish medium tank, the UDES 16. UDES? 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 I'm going to call it the UDES. This is the new mini line that splits off of the Leo that was just released. I finished this grind, unlocked the Tier 10 probably about a week ago. Usually I knock out my reviews right after that, and I had to take a knee. I had to take a break from the UDES and think about this one, because had I done the review as soon as I stopped grinding it, it would have not gone well for the UDES 16. And while I don't think I'm quite on the ledge right now, we'll talk about it as we go. This is a Tier 9. My grind was not grinding any of the modules. So I did free XP through the modules. I had a pretty good crew with about 3 skills or so. Brother in Arms and such. We'll talk about that when we get there. And I managed a 50% win rate. But we'll talk about all of that as we go. We'll do the standard thing as I do with my reviews. Do an overview, look at the tech tree. We won't look at a 3D model because it's not quite built apparently in tanks.gg, but we will talk about the armor profile. We'll do a comparison amongst its peers, look at my stats, my setup, and then we'll give you some examples of gameplay of the UDES 16. A very interesting tank. Very interesting. Alright, here it is in Garage. You look over here, it's a further development of the UDES 14E2 project. It was proposed by the Haglunds company. I'm probably saying that wrong. The vehicle was to have a lowered silhouette, which it obviously does in the game here, and have a 105mm autoloader gun. More about that later. In 1975, the project was merged with the Bofors project and resulted in the UDES 1516 project. No prototypes were built, so this is another development or idea tank that never really saw the light of day and did not even have a prototype built. But much like it says there, it is definitely a lowered silhouette, although it is fairly big on the sides. We'll take a look at some of the other tanks. Gigantic T-54E1. E50 is gigantic compared to it. It's actually comparable to a Batchat 25 TP, and is it even lower? No, it's about the same height. Centurion is pretty massive. Skoda is big. Standard B is big. Maybe when you get down to the version 2, it's close in size. Even the T-55A seems to be maybe a little bit beefier, but about the same size, really, if you take a look at it right there. So interesting thing about this tank is it does have a rear-mounted turret. You can see that it has highly sloped upper armor. The lower armor is not very sloped. You really want to hide that. We'll talk about that a little while later. This also has hydraulics, which means that you get about 5 or 6 degrees of gun depression right here, which is interesting because you can see that it's got the capability of the gun to lower up outside of, or the gun is actually mounted outside of the turret itself. And then the hydraulics would take over and give you the full range of the -12. We'll talk about that as we go, because that's an interesting thing about this tank. And it, frankly, it doesn't work that well for World of Tanks. The mechanic itself does, but as far as what it gives you in gameplay is kind of interesting. We'll get to that in just a minute. So that's pretty much it for the overview right there. Let's move on to the tech tree. All right, take a look at the tech tree. We'll start with the crew issues right here. I did note this on my UDES 14.5 review where I talked about some of the goofiness with the crew. It is going to split off of a medium tank Leo, so that's good at least, and that your crew are going over to a medium tank as opposed to where it used to go up to a heavy tank with the mill, and you'd have to retrain their tank type as well. You'll notice that the Leo carries 4 guys, and you are going to lose the loader. And I mentioned earlier we talk about the auto loader. This thing has an auto loader, but it's not an auto loader in the case of French or in the case of Italian autoloaders where you've got multiple rounds in the clip. It is an autoloader in that it doesn't have a loader, so it's auto-loading its one shot kind of in the standard way. The IS-3A used to be like that. It's got a 3-man crew. It's now actually got an autoloader with multiple rounds. So the UDES, while it has air quotes an autoloader, you're not getting the multiple rounds downrange and the reload mechanics and all that good stuff. But you will be losing your loader. All right, so just know that. Now, if you're bringing the crew out of other tanks in the Swiss line, which can get a bit goofy because the way that this line has been put out, you need to realize that your heavy tank guys will cross right over. You've just got to retrain them into the UDES 16, spend some gold, or lose some skills if you're using silver, as they are commander, gunner, driver, which is the same. However, if you're trying to take them out of the upper tier TDs, you'll notice they have commander, driver, radio operator. So you're going to have to spend a little bit more money retraining their actual crew position skill. All right, so just some things to watch out for that. Now let's take a look at the upgrades or the modules. This was a little bit surprising. You actually don't need the tracks for anything. You can see that I can put on the engine, I can put on the radio, whatever that thing is. I can put the turret on, I can get that bigger gun, and never do I actually need the tracks right there. So those are going to give you a small performance boost there. Do that in any way, shape, or form you want if you're not using free experience, but probably really upgrade everything else and then do the tracks last just to get your combat capability. Really, it's up to you at the end of the day, but just know that that is how it is set up. All right, let's look at the armor profile. The armor profile on this thing is really interesting. A lot of people are talking about what a monster hold down tank it is. I have not found that. I'm going to talk about that as we go. It's good. It's certainly capable. But to be quite honest, I'd rather have an Object 430 or even a M46 Patton or probably a Centurion Mark 7.1 out of all those for hold down capability. Again, we'll talk about it as we go, but the numbers are, the hull is at 45, the turret is at 70, and then 40 on the side and 20 on the back of each one of those. You can see that if you're putting a good angle on them, say you've covered up that lower plate right there, and that's the trick, isn't it? Then you really have a very highly angled piece of armor right there to try to pin. It's going to be very difficult. The effective thickness of that angle right there is going to be pretty amazing. And if you can keep them in front of you, you don't give them any kind of side shot into your very, very weak sides, and you're able to cover up the lower plate, and you're able to manage the hydraulics such that they don't overcompensate when you're attempting to use that minus 12 degrees of depression, then you're in pretty good shape. Now, notice all those caveats that I gave you right there. Also realize, and we'll talk about this when we get there, when you creep up to a hill in this, you've only got about, I want to say it's 5 or 6 degrees of gun depression to begin with. Not very much. The rest of it comes from the hydraulics, and you have to be going slow. I'm pretty sure it's around 15 kilometers an hour or lower. Then the hydraulics will kick in, and while you're using your mouse to aim at somebody, to aim downwards, then your hydraulics will lift the back end of the tank up, and you'll get that extra depression. If you go too fast, that depression goes away, i.e. I'm attempting to maneuver like you do in hold down positions in World of Tanks, and if you're not careful and you go too fast, all of a sudden you've lost all that gun depression, your gun kicks up, and now you've got to reestablish it and figure it out. Any kind of sideways movement is going to be very difficult to control the penetration or to control the exposure in the side of the tank. So my point there is it's actually much more difficult to use. If you were in a straight-on fight, hiding in a bush, poking over a ridge, then you're doing a pretty good job. But more than likely in that case, you're attempting not to be seen. Or if you are seen, they're far enough away that you can manage all those things. I will admit it is great in those situations, but that is a very small percentage of the time in World of Tanks as you're attempting to go hold down. Hold down in World of Tanks is lots of things. It's over ridges, it's behind pieces of rubble, it's hiding behind other tanks, all kinds of things right there. And in that case, it's no better than really any other tank, and especially because it actually has a pretty large, weak lower plate right there. And if you're out in the open, that thing's going to be well hittable. Or if you have anyone with any kind of height shooting down on you, they're going right through all of that like butter. So I just wanted to mention that. It's kind of an interesting thing about how this tank is designed. While it can be a hold down monster, it is a very situational monster. There's only a very few places and situations where that can be effective. Now, if you're in that, if you can position it like that, then it is highly, highly effective. Probably one of the best in the game, unless you start talking about some triple overmatch and some other stuff. But we'll get into all of that. That's the 3D model or the armor profile right there. There are some weak spots up here on the top, but they're very small and hard to hit. Let's move on to a comparison. All right, so the tail of the tape. You'll remember that the Tier 8 had a really hard-hitting gun for Tier 8, and I thought that was going to be one of the hallmarks of the series here, that they would be situationally hold down, fairly weak in a maneuvering fight or as a traditional medium, but they would be carrying a big stick and hitting hard. And I did not realize that the Tier 9 only has a 390 Alpha, and as you'll notice, nearly everybody in town has a 390 Alpha. The WZ is at 440. This thing is nothing special with its gun, so there's no fear factor in pushing this tank at Tier 9 for anybody else. Everyone else is carrying as big a stick. It's not that big a deal. The heavies aren't that worried about you because they're not going to hit you hard, and that hurts this thing a bunch, because that was one of the greatest advantages of the Tier 8, and this thing simply does not have that advantage. Then we move on to average penetration. you'll look at the average penetration and go, okay, it's in the ballpark. It's low, not the lowest. The E50 and the M46 are worse. I believe the T54E1 is even worse than either one of those two. So it's certainly not the worst in class, but it's not great. And the problem, however, runs into the fact that it has, I believe, the worst or close to the worst gold pen. And the gold's APCR. So it only gets about 29 more pen with APCR. And you've got guys running around with over 300 pen on heat shells. And that crushes this thing's capability. It absolutely crushes it because supposedly the strength of this thing is hold down and hiding behind things, which means you're going to get some longer range shots, which means you're kind of relying on some pen if you can dab two to get through some of the heavily armored tanks. And this thing cannot do it. It simply cannot do that. So it's attempting to get side shots and maneuver, but it's not very good at that. So you can see the conundrum here. They've designed a tank that has some certain kind of very good capabilities in certain areas, but then they've given it other capabilities that almost completely negate that. And it's very interesting, the design on that thing. The rate of fire is okay, not great, 6.01, one of the lower ones down here. The reload time is about 10 seconds, again in the ballpark, slightly high but not too bad. And you would think, okay, well, if it had that big alpha gun, then I'd be okay with the reload time. But really, it's only got a 390 alpha gun, and it's more than a bunch of other tanks that have 390s. So what was the advantage that was given to it there? Was it extra pen? No. What was it? Well, it's this weird armor profile that you're supposed to be able to use, which is only situationally usable. And this minus 12 gun depression, which is only situationally usable. It's not, it might as well be minus 6 or so because of the difficulty of making the hydraulics work. Now, let me just break here just for a second. Mechanically in the game, they work seamlessly. They're nice. They work as they are designed. You go slow enough, they kick in and they start to move around. But it is a bit wonky, at least for me, with the mouse and the system and the way the game is played, to really effectively get a lot of gun depression on this. And then it's so easy to over-angle yourself with the gun depression because it's hard to tell exactly how much angle you've built by trying to get, say, a look-down shot right there. Especially considering if you're looked down to one guy, somebody else on another ridge shooting across, maybe getting a really nice flat plate right on you. And I got 8 alive like that quite a bit. It's just an interesting thing to me that the design of it, the idea, from what I can tell that the devs had, looked good on paper, and it simply does not work in the game very well. Not for a very lot of people. Not for a lot of people. All right, aiming time is okay. At 2.11, there are worse. The Object 430, although the Object 430 is known for a bad aiming time in there. The WZ, I saw the WZ and I went, holy crap, 3.26? I did not realize the aim time on that thing was so atrociously bad. I knew it was bad, but that is amazingly bad. Dispersion is 0.35. Okay, right? It's okay, but the soft stats just don't really seem very good on this tank. It has trouble hitting where you're aiming. And for a while, and I've seen a couple of posts and even some pretty good community contributors kind of wondering out loud, hey, is something wrong with this model? Is there something wrong with this gun in the game? Not just the stats, but the actual way it's modeled and set up, the coding, because it seems like it really, really struggles to hit where you aim. And when you're running around with the worst gold pen and one of the worst regular APCR pens, by the way, APCR is its regular round, right? It gets APCR in both rounds, which is a problem because at range you lose pen with APCR. It really does struggle to hit what it should. Even given all of its limitations, it seems worse than it really should be. The DPM is decent at 2,300, but again, I go back to, I'm already beat this dead horse, but let's beat it again. There's some give and take on this tank. And a lot of times you can see what the give and take is. You say, okay, it's got a really big alpha and it's got a long reload and okay pen, or the charts and the numbers move a little bit. This one just seems to be a limb fact all across the board, other than some depression that's hard to use, and some really weird angling that is situationally dependent. I'll spit it out here. It just doesn't work. It really doesn't. It does not work. Hit points 1,650 are all right. Come down here and see what else we got. And here's that armor profile. Other than that one position where you can get hold down and make her happen with crazy angles, it's trash, right? It's awful. Look at it. It's It's just, I think if you've played a bit of the Sturv TDs, you'll understand what I'm talking about. That in certain situations where you can just show that top plate at a mega angle, you're really going to be bouncy, but it's kind of unreliable. It's difficult to use with the hydraulics at times, and even though you don't have to press X to get into siege mode or travel mode with this tank like you do in the TDs, you're going to find the same issues with the armor. Sometimes you just bounce that massive shot and it's awesome, and then 5 guys pin you right after that because they have a different angle on you or whatever. So I don't know, man. It's interesting. The mobility is okay. It's doing 50. It feels fairly sprightly. It feels a little bit better actually than the Tier 8. Tier 8 was a bit sluggish to me. This one moves around decently. It's got a good reverse speed at 20, so no problem there. And then it's quite stealthy, right? So it's at 16.86. It's right near the top, but there's a couple other contenders in there that are close to it as well. The 430 somehow is, whatever. The 430 is at 17.84. The standard B, which is a pretty big tank, is somehow at 16.01, which I can't quite figure out right there. And the spotting's at 390, which is decent, but you would think, you know, if you were going to build this kind of stealthy medium that you are designing to kind of be a standoff hold down fighter, wouldn't you give it a little more view range so it could kind of use some of those advantages? Nope. No. But it will have a great radio. All right, the Swedes, as I've noted on the Tier 8 review, have the best radios ever. Look at this, 850. I mean, it's just head and shoulders above everyone. So I that's my favorite stat in the game. It really is. Overall, I already went off on the tangent on it. It has some very specific, very good in situations advantages, which are almost completely overshadowed by its disadvantages and make it not even work. And I think the gun is probably the biggest problem that makes all those other advantages and disadvantages not work for it. All right, let's move on. That's enough beating him up in the comparison. Let's look at my stats. Well, all right, how did I do? You can see that Guido's down there at a lowly 50% after 74 battles, 878 on the average XP, which is quite low for me for Tier 9. And I will admit right up front that some of my angst with this tank is probably from poor performance. So let's just throw the sour grapes out right away. I don't believe, while my stats are relatively low, I don't think they're 50% stats, and I think the stats are going to go up a little bit if I played it out to 200 battles or so. But it would take that long really to get used to this tank because it is such a min-max kind of tank. You're really going to have to work at it to get good at this tank. Now, obviously, the very best players are going to step into it and do well, and people are doing well because the requirements for Ace Tanker are quite high. But I think it's very situational as far as who's going to be good at this, and the average player is probably going to struggle a bit. So you'll see that I'm at 50% win rate. I've survived 36, which is reasonable. Not great. I'd rather be closer to 40. Hits are reasonable at 76. Damage ratio and destruction are relatively low for me. Armor use is interesting. There it is. So there's the 0.41. Now, I always say somewhere around 0.5, your armor is starting to become usable. And at 0.1, you've really got an armored tank. This one is slightly below the usable armor, and I think that really reflects the situational nature of the hold down, right? It's not the ultimate bouncy machine. It can be in a few situations, and that's played out by the 0.41 on the armor use efficiency. But in other situations, you're going to get absolutely wrecked. And, oh, by the way, I haven't mentioned this yet, but Artie will absolutely destroy this thing constantly. So it's not very agile as far as getting away. People are going to want to try to sit, hold down places. It's going to get hammered by Artie. It really is. Experience, as I noted, is a little low. My DPM is low for me for a Tier 9 at 1957, especially for my recent Tier 9s. Damage received is high, which means I'm getting hammered quite a bit, obviously. And my assistance damage is okay. Spotted is whatever. And enemy vehicles destroyed is low at 1.15. So that's not very good. My best game was 4,839 damage with a 1764 experience. Now, I only got a class 1 in this thing, so let's take a look at the standard B, which is another relatively new tank that I've played in the last year or two or so. 204 battles in and only 51%, but it's sitting at 2,300 damage and 1,473 received, and all the other numbers are better. So probably I'm underperforming in my win rate on this tank a little bit, and 948 average XP on that one. If we go over to the Type 61 at 60%, we're looking at 2,200 DPM. All these numbers are better, so you can see that Obviously, I'm underperforming a bit in my UDES 16 right there. Interesting one on the WZ120 that I mentioned earlier with the crazy aim time. 58% win rate at 356 battles, 910 on the average XP, but only 1989 on the damage caused. But there are 356 battles on this, so I really believe if I play this thing up to 200, 300, I'm probably going to get closer to 55%. And I imagine my DPM will get up to around 2100 maybe or so. Be a little more competitive and get even my experience a little bit over 900, I would imagine, in that many battles, just based on what I've seen on these numbers. So I did okay. I didn't do great, but I think a lot of those numbers really speak to its situational nature. All right, let's look at my setup. All right, for my setup, we're going to jump over to the tier 10 because I've already moved my crew. So that was the crew that was in there, actually 2 skill plus, with the commander being a 3 skill plus crew member in there. Remember, it's a 3 crew tank, so you're going to have multiple qualifications on people. For example, the commander is the commander and the radio operator and the loader. All right, now that is actually a disadvantage for these low crew tanks. Whereas you would have a loader or someone else who could get other skills on them, it's going to take a long time to build this commander up to all of those things. So probably not the best place to put one of your special commanders like the female commanders. But I've got so many crew running around, I don't bother with it too much. I just throw that out there. It's a weird thing with these well, they're not really smaller tanks, but smaller crews in tanks. When they have multiple qualifications, it kind of hurts your overall crew. That's maybe the only argument in the entire game for changing the crew system to just everything being on the commander, but I'll leave that be for now. All right, so we are here at the UDES 16 now. I'm using a vert stab, I'm using a rammer, and a vent. And that's probably not very controversial of a setup right there. However, I think a lot of people might use optics instead of vents just to maximize its view range, as it wants to stay hidden most of the time. So consider that is a possibility on there. I had all the maximum modules. We won't go through all of that. Remember what I talked about, though, you can put everything on there without the tracks, apparently. It's got 2 APCR rounds. Here they are if we look over on the gun itself. 234 pen on the regular APCR, 263 on the gold APCR. But remember, both of those lose pen at range. So it's actually a disadvantage to some extent having APCR, especially with that low of a pen. It's interesting decisions. Large kits, large fire extinguisher. I did not use any directives on this tank, and I played, 74 battles or so. That is my setup. Let's look at 3 examples. All right, this was about my 6th or 7th battle, and I was not pleased with this tank. I had played the, 5 or 6 before it, and I could not believe how poorly how poorly I was doing in it, and B, how poorly the tank performed. And I'm blaming it on the tank, right? It's definitely the tank. And I actually titled this one, It's Sorta Okay. So let's take a look. We are here on Siegfried Line, and I'm going to go ahead and push into town, and I'm going to play this tank like it's not really meant to be played. All right, so bad on me. But here's a map where it sort of has to be played that way. I could go out in the field, play hold down, and hope that some targets show up, and snipe at the 4190 GF with my relatively bad gun and the other guys who might be out there, and maybe move into the side and go hold down along the way. Or I can get in here where the battle really is and attempt to help my team win the game, and that's what I choose to do right here, knowing that obviously my lower plate is easily exposed down here. So for the moment, I'm just looking for a surprise shot on somebody that might be coming around this corner. I don't want to go around that corner into that alleyway. They'll shoot me, and I see the 50 TP has a guy over here to end the ISM. So I'm like, hey, all right, let's go try this hold down hydraulic capability and see how it works with this tank. So first we find a T10 in there, and we bounce. So we'll back out. Sort of hold down right there, but I am exposing a little bit of the side armor. There we go. So I've got some rubble and things that I can keep him from shooting me. He gets a shot into my view slit, knocks that thing down. And I'm sort of dueling with the T10 here. Thankfully, he bounces. But I am exposing a little bit of that lower plate. So I'm going to come around to the rubble and try to cover up the lower plate right here and sneak around, see if I can just take a nicely aimed shot. There we go. And I finally get some damage and a nice high roll at 430. Now you can start to see the hydraulics move around a little bit. See how I kind of came in and stopped? That was a bad shot on an angled tank. And then I got a little bit more boost from the hydraulics right there to get the gun down. Now I see the ISM, so I'm thinking, hey, I might be able to come up here and see if I just expose a little bit of my tank And there's that hydraulics goofing around, right? He bounces, nice angle, I bounce. I pick a bad spot to shoot right between the two on the top of the turret. So I'm not going to have an overmatch with this 105mm apparently on his top turret. Now I'm going after that weak spot, which I don't think is a weak spot. So I'm really buffooning this until I finally figure out, you know what, I really need to go for the hatch right here. So we'll come up here. And I think I do this one more time like a dope. There we go. So he's going to bounce those all day. Hopefully he was on a bounce mission and I helped him out right here. That would be nice. Thinking, ooh, side turret. Nope. All right, finally I got my brain engaged. Brain engaged, 350, slight low roll. And then the T10 comes in. He's looking for some shots on me. He's a little angled there, so I'm going to thump one into his side. Get a 366 out of it. ISM moves, doesn't want to be shot in the turret anymore. And now I'm looking for more shots onto the T10. Can't quite get there. There he comes. Sneak one in. That's just a pure miss. Had nothing to do with armor. That was the side of my tank, so had he hit me, it would have been an easy pin for him. Nothing got him. There we go. So down he goes. And things are going pretty well. It's 4-1. Come up and over this. In case you didn't know that's possible, it is. And we'll come back around this way. The ISM died. 5100's hammered. Down he goes. And we'll come around here and see if we can work on the TS5, who gets a shot right into me. No problem pinning me. Sort of missed his weak spot up there, didn't quite get into it. He out reloads me, or it's a very similar reload, so I'm going to go ahead and use this hold down. I get rammed by my buddy. There's a bounce. There's that situational armor. Go into his lower plate, right? Gonna no. Bounce off the lower plate, and that's all my gold's gone. And I'll come around this way, and it's really just cleanup at this point. So I'm going to end up with a good number out of this, but it's one of those games where the number comes, or a good portion of the number comes after the game is won. We're just shooting the poor guys that are completely surrounded. So we'll come up here. Now there's a great situation right there. So what I did on this, even though I have 12 degrees of depression, I had to come all the way up and over this hill to easily get my gun on this guy. If I'd have stopped up here at the top, I could have got it there, but I'd had to stop, aim, start aiming my gun down, then the hydraulics kick in and lift my rear end up, and I'd have finally got a shot. It's faster just to come all the way up and over the hill with a little bit downslope and take that shot on that guy in a situation like this. And that's why the depression sounds good, but it's hard to use in the actual game. So I get hammered by their UDES, who's hiding up in the back, doing what probably most people would say, well, that's what the UDES should do. He should be back up on that hill, hiding in a bush, hold down, baby, and see what he can do. So he's a little sideways, not the best plan. He's using that nice concrete armor there. Takes a bunch of hits. I get a little bit of spotting in there. Another situation where right now I'm in pretty good shape coming up and over this. Don't quite get any of those 4 hit points there. Again, coming up and over. Now I slow down and I'm trying to use some of that depression. There we go. So I don't come up and over and face off a autoloader and let him just shotgun me down while I use my 9 seconds of reload. I think it's actually more like 7 or so with my configuration, and we end up with 3,326, 1,470, which is okay on the bounce, and 1,234. But this was a raffle stomp, right? So this was a win almost no matter what I did, and I didn't play it really to the strength that UDES, minus a little bit of the micro positioning inside the courtyard right there, which was kind of interesting from a angle standpoint on the turret right there, and then some of the hold down fighting with the T10, minimizing my lower plate exposure. But again, very situational. I knew that spot was there. I figured I could probably do some of those things in there, but not really this tank's strength. And had I been pressed very much, I'd have probably been hard pressed. Had I been pressed, I'd been hard pressed to be effective in the middle right there. I had plenty of friends, and we killed them in every direction. But I just want to show you a couple things on that that illustrate some of the difficulties of using this tank. Let's move on to the second example. The second example, you know, after that game I just showed you, I went, I don't know, 15, 20 battles after that and got even more frustrated. I was down at like 41% at one point with about 1,600 DPG. I loaded into this battle a little bit tilted, and I said, I don't know, let's just try something different. I'm just going to drive up into these bushes, and maybe we can stop their scouts from coming across. And let me see if I can do a little bit of stealthy fighting with this thing. Not really hold down, and again, obviously, understanding that it's possible I get absolutely wiped out if somebody drives in and sees me. But we'll go with double bush, we'll just shoot that dude, and then we'll jump into the bush here. And this one was titled, I don't know, maybe it's a scout. You know, the frustration was high at this point. 2-tier battle, top tier, lots of 9s and some 8s in this battle. And I'm just going to hang out in these bushes right here. Now again, it's got some pretty good stealth capability. I don't have a camo crew in this, as I recall. I don't remember when I looked at it whether they had any camo skills at all. Certainly not all 3 of them. See the 140 over there? Did not aim in fully on that, so I'd have done a lot more favors for myself had I not tried to snap it. But I thought he was going to get behind a rock. He's not actually behind a rock. So the drop one that gets, looks like his lower plate, so that was lucky. We'll take it. He's showing a lot of side armor here to us. The Lance and C in the middle. Oh, that goes into his front. Just unlucky, going a little left. Long range shot, so not really amazing that it's missing in several directions. There we go. 396, nice high roll. Couple nice high rolls. 433, 396, that'll work. And he backs off, so the object 430 gets punished. We're doing pretty good up there in the northeast, but we're doing very poorly down here in the southwest. So I'm going to switch around, see if I can't get some shots on these dudes. Now, it's nice to back up behind these bushes, but unfortunately I back out from behind these bushes the other direction. That can be difficult. There we go, so I get a little bit of bush action, and wow, that one goes right where I'm aiming. Very lucky, but it does get me spotted. So whether that was somebody else nearby, there's a Lance and C over there, or whether that was actually him, I just wasn't quite in the bush like I thought I was. And I'm expecting to take hits at any moment. Somehow, nobody is paying attention to me right there, but I decide it's time to back out of that general area. We'll come over here. The IS-7 is pushed in. We got a lot of guys camping in the back right there. We're doing, again, okay up there in the northeast right now, but unfortunately, it looks like they're starting to overwhelm us a little bit. And the IS-7 is moving up like he should, so that's good on him. Looking for spots. He must have some snipers back behind him. Hard to tell since none of them have showed themselves, and I can't see them right now. This might be where the optics would have come in nicely for this tank. I might have been able to just have just enough to look up to the top of that ridge, especially if they were firing down at my campers down there. I'd love to go across, but I know the Lance and C is right there, and if they do have a bunch of guys up there, I'm not going to get very far across that open ground. So we're just going to wait and see how this goes. I see the 263 trolling around back there. Try to get into his side armor, but don't quite get there. I knew he was going to get behind that rock, so I wanted to get that shot off. And he gets tracked just where I can't quite get to him. Got that guy doing his thing. Now we got the T-103 up top. Bat check gets hammered, down he goes. And we got 5 and 3. And one of the problems with a spot like this is you can see my camera. I am spinning my head on a swivel looking in every direction that I can. I'm not going to survive very long if I'm found. And now I'm the only guy out here kind of making sure that nobody comes across the middle. And because our team is camping so hard, we just can't afford that. So I'm going to have to be the canary in a coal mine here. I've positioned myself in this bush as much as possible so that whatever angle they're coming at me, unless they really come from about that angle there, they should not see me until they get very close. We're still doing okay up in the northeast, but I know there's that 263 in Lansing, and now there's a 50 TP, so they've got all of this swamp area covered, and God knows how many of those TDs are sitting up there on the top. It's hard to tell. The T-103 isn't, obviously. There's a big glob of red up in the northeast that's hard to read. Now we've got the 430 up there. Looks like the Bat Chat 25 has seen him. And the good news is the enemy is not really being very aggressive right now. So far. So, you know, one of the problems with putting yourself in a spot like this, I see that IS-3A a little bit late. is there's no way to get out, right? So if I do get pushed, I'm probably going to get gunned down. And it can be pretty amazing from a spotting standpoint if you can start to see guys and all these snipers sitting up at the cap can get shots on them. That goes right into his gun mallet. That's amazing, isn't it? I hit him, but I hit the gun mallet from that range. So it can be amazing, but it can also be a very quick death if they push in. I had a game a little while later where I attempted the same thing, and I did not last very long. They sent 3 or 4 scouts across. They got behind me into my side. I had nowhere to go. I got shot from every direction and went back to garage. So very high risk, high reward kind of spot. There we go. Finally get a shot on that guy. Sort of expected to get spotted there, but then this happens. So this is one of the issues I'm talking about. We got a 430 moving in here. He's full hit points. I'm full hit points. Sort of back out of this thing, looking for a shot, and I just sort of rush it. And then he disappears, so I can't see him. And I make a bad move right here. I'm trying to find him from the bush, and I'm sort of exposing myself on the side right there in that open bush area. Then there's the FV crossing over there. Take that shot. Doesn't get me spotted, so that works out. So I'll pop up here. There we go. And we get a bunch of spotting damage down to 2,700. And that's starting to make me feel good. We got a nice lead at 11 and 6. But I need to find this object 430 right here. And I'm thinking, hey guys, why don't you just... There's 3 of them. Why don't y'all just come down and help me? And then I immediately get hammered by the 103. Get spotted somehow. I'm not really sure if the 103 saw me. I might have had some of my tank exposed to the 430 as he was out in the open right there. But the T103 gets a chunk of me right there. Actually, he bounced, didn't he? Never mind. There's a miss. 430 is now bumming. He doesn't have a lot of places to go, and I'm thinking, all right, looks like he's coming right at me, so let's see if we can put a shot. And unfortunately, it's a track. It doesn't quite damage him, but down he goes to a bunch of snipers. So finally, the snipers come out of the woodwork and help me. 3,791. Only 1,784 damage. And one of the reasons I didn't want to really cross here is I knew that 50 TP was on my side and the T103 is up top. And once I'm out in the open and being shot from the sides and from above, all that ankled armor isn't going to do a whole bunch. But we'll just do it. Cross over here. Looks like the 50 TP is hiding down in the pit down there. I do get spotted on the way in. Down he goes. And somehow that's my spotting damage. I can't quite figure that one out. But there you go. 4,568. And then we find it. Now here's the example of that. Once again, that hydraulics. I stopped. I had that 6 degrees. Once I got slow enough, the hydraulics kicked in and I got that couple extra degrees right there. And got my gun on him. Didn't hurt me right there, and that's more spotting. So 5,462, 1,784. Again, kind of just, I'm searching here for what the play style of this tank is. This one was just sort of a lark, but I just wanted to show you that, you know, I don't know, maybe it's a scout. I'm trying to figure this thing out. All right, let's go to the last example. All right, for the third and final example, this is my best result in the tank. You can see we're here again, 2 tiers, top tier. I guess I didn't do very well bottom tier. So I tried to show a bottom tier. I had plenty of bottom tier battles. I'll tell you what though, with the matchmaker, it was a lot better than it used to be. There's many fewer bottom tier battles to pick from than there used to be. And it's tier 9, so you're gonna tend to be 1 tier down or top tier more. So we're gonna come up here. You can see that the speed is decent. I'm gonna get up here in a decent amount of time, but if they'd had faster tanks really pressing for there, I probably would have got shot in the side. So do watch for that. And we come up to the sniper position here and we start taking a look, but you'll notice that I noticed pretty quickly we've got a bit of a situation in the middle right there. Everybody's come this way. We got campers, we got heavies pushing in, and now I'm looking for a way off this hill. And I know that I can probably do it right here without taking any damage if I'm careful. I don't want to go down the ramp, get shot in the side, and we're going to flex over this way. Now, I'm going to take a bit of a chance. The safest way would be go all the way back to the cap and use the cover of the buildings This is the more dangerous way. We're going to cross this open area, and it is exposed to their sniper nest up there. And I sort of expected to take a hit trying to get over here. Got a bit lucky. That's a good thing. They either weren't looking or couldn't see me, maybe too far away from the bushes. Don't know. They weren't up at the edge, that's for sure. Or they would have easily seen me right there. And I see the prototype up here. There's already some guys trolling around the middle, so we definitely need to come up here, see if I can get some spots for these campers in the back, the TDs, and at least keep them from pushing up and over and flanking us right here. So I see the prototype, and this is where you're going to see a little bit of the struggle with, there you go. That's a great example. Now you see how slow that came down? 12 degrees of depression, which sounds really good, and you might go, ooh, that spot's a great place to use depression. But not for this tank necessarily, and I have to be very careful on how I do it. So there we go, I'm trying to get up here, and we'll take that shot, and down he goes. And the EBR shoots me, and I'm wondering, how did he get over there? But he's actually right behind me, and he barely clips me and kills himself. So I got a little help from the guys in the back, and down he goes. From the direction of the shot, it looked like he was coming from back where our UDES 03 is, and I'm thinking, is my team shooting me? But nope, he had actually driven around there, and that was the angle at which he was shooting me from. So we deal with that. We got a Patton and a Progetto kind of pushing around there. I am not a pushing kind of tank, so I'm not going to go push with those guys. We'll flex over this way and start working. And I can see that they're kind of coming around the corner here. They're starting to beat our guys over here, so I'm thinking maybe I can get some shots, or I can just simply sneak up here. Kind of surprised nobody showed up in their sniper spot when I did this. And I'm going to take a bit of a risk, right? I'm sort of at this point in this grind, playing this tanks a little more loosely. I'm just trying to see what it can do and what it cannot do. So we'll just come around here. Again, there's that depression causing me issues. Somehow he turns his turret, snaps his shot, and hits me, which blew my mind. I could not believe it. But that is one of the problems with a rear-mounted turret, right? I had to come all the way around. I was really exposing a lot more of my tank than I might have thought I was, based on being more used to front-mounted or middle-mounted turrets. So he actually had that shot, and there's the hole right there. So obviously, quite a bit of the tank was exposed. I would have thought it was a decent angle, but the amount of armor is very low, so not really a surprise. And now I've got a Pantera behind me, and I've got an Oho in front of me, and a bit of a pickle. So he takes some arty shot. Some arty shot, gets stunned, but he's staring right at me. Pantera, it backs off. Looks like he's got more trouble, so I'm going to go ahead and get on out of this spot. Probably not worth being anywhere. It was probably not worth being there to begin with, but we'll go ahead and sneak around here. I saw the guy up top, the Tiger 2. I really wanted to be across in the middle on the other side of this road, but he'd have seen me and probably put another shot into me if I'd have tried to cross over there. He did see me, but he would have had time to put the shot into me. And we're starting to win. So now I'm going to try to use some of this hull down here. Not really the best positioning for it, because I think the side of my hull is kind of exposed. I don't get spotted there, so I feel like he's come off that, and all of a sudden now there he is. I know this position, and I realize if he backs up too much from that rock, I should get a shot on him right about here. There we go. And I'll push back up into here, and we're starting to win in every location. The Conqueror's not looking, so I'm just going to sneak around here to his lower plate, put him down. Now the Oho is definitely staring at me. The 100.01 misses, and the Oho is thinking, oh crud, which guy do I look at? And I'm not fast enough to come out there and shoot before he shoots. I also can't put him down unless I roll really high. And if he's shooting HE and gets into my lower plate, or even if he shoots the top of the armor and somehow pins it, I'm in big trouble. So I'm just going to go ahead and ignore him. Come around here, I see that this Conway is futzing around. T-5041 is facing a T-95. Well, was a T-95 and a Patton, but now it's not. Put a shot into him. And somehow I'm not spotted there. That kind of blew my mind. I was not really sure how exactly that happened. He must have been far enough away from the bushes. Come around here and we'll just finish him off, right? No, we will not. We will get a armor not penetrated, so I got some kind of weird angle on him. I really don't want to let him have a shot. Staring right at me. Hoping that he'll get busy with something else. Good news now that we're both dark, unless someone else on his team sees me, which I don't think they do, is he doesn't know when I'm going to try to pop out either, so we're going to take a look here. There we go. Should have gone for his back. I'm not sure why I didn't do that. I shoot. I'm thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to out-reload this guy. No problem. Right? I'm a medium. I'll out-reload a Conway every day right now. No, I will not. I will not. But he gets into my track. No damage. He's probably raging at this point. And now we're at 2770. 335 assist. And we're headed over here. We'll see if we get some Patton and some TD, or not some TD, but some SPG damage. The interesting thing here is this ends up being a class 1. I had better results numbers wise, but not a class 1, so interesting. There's that weird depression. I get the shot and the assist. Now I'm at 3K and I find this Patton. I put 380 on him, and now he's within a 1 shot. I know I'm probably going to get shot. Well, in this case I got shot at. He missed. Good on him. Put another shot in there, and holy cow, I left him some hit points. That's a bummer. 356. Gets one on me. Again, I'm getting a lot of lucky crits. Now there's... All right, that one got cut off a little bit right there, but what I was talking about as I got cut off is with the hydraulic system and circling, it can be a bit funky. The hydraulic system, again, has to be going slow before it kicks in, so you only got that 5-6 degrees or so of just standard gun depression out of the tank as you're circling it. So if you go up over ridges and things, it can bring the gun offline. It can be a little bit difficult to do. Not really its strength. Fortunately, that Patton missed me twice. All right, so in conclusion, what do you want to say about this tank? Well, I don't think it works very well for what it's designed to do. It's got too many weaknesses that are not overcome by its very few strengths that are very situational. I think there are players who are good, very good at the hold down thing and careful gameplay that are going to be very good in this tank. So it is one of those tanks where it's got, you know, it's a min-max tank. Some of its max capabilities are going to be outrageous. Some really good gameplay is going to happen in this tank. But for people who are more generalists, they're going to struggle mightily to make this thing work the way that it is designed. And I think, without getting too much into, you know, a coffee talk kind of talk where we talk about the game in general, I think it's a really good example of the way the game design is going to this more min-max idea of tanks with oversized capabilities in certain areas and massive weaknesses in other areas. And while that's an okay game design, the problem is you've got other tanks like the Russian ones who are just very good at everything, if not better at most everything. So whatever this thing can do, hold down wise, a Russian tank can do probably as good or maybe even better situationally. Plus a Russian tank has so many more abilities to just play as a standard medium. So I don't think this tank necessarily works. I love the tier 8. I think the differences there were the gun depression didn't rely so much on the hydraulics. It had more of a standard layout with its turret, although it was slightly rear mounted. It wasn't so far rear mounted. And the gun had a high alpha. Which sort of separated it from the pack and gave it some capabilities in a duel that other mediums didn't have. This thing simply has no capabilities in a duel that another medium doesn't have, minus some really angled armor in a situationally dependent kind of configuration. So there you go. That's my opinion. It's not the worst tank I've ever played. Yes, I did poorly, so some of that is on me as well. But I think the standard player is going to struggle quite a bit to make this tank work. And it's going to get a lot of hate, more than likely. And justifiably so in a lot of cases, because it simply is very average to bad in most World of Tanks medium tank situations. All right, guys, that's all I've got. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed, I would appreciate the subscription, and we will see you.